Hello and welcome. So for this Premiere Pro tutorial, we're going to look at how to apply effects, how to do transitions between clips, and how to adjust time and speed of playback of clips. So let's get going. We're going to go ahead and create a new project. I'm going to find a good spot to put that and title it whatever you think is appropriate. And we don't need to change any of the settings in the rest of that window. So now once the window opens up, there's two files that are on Canvas that I'd like you to use with this project. And those two files are both from the Prelinger archives. One's called How the Eye Functions, and the other one is The Incredible Machine. I chose these two videos because they have pretty great little bits in them, and they're distinct enough that when we go and we start doing effects and splicing them together, it'll make sense because they're obviously different films. So I'm going to go ahead and double click in my project pane down here. I want to make sure that the project window is open, tab is open, not one of these other tabs. Or you can hit Command I on the keyboard or go up to File and go down to Import. Any of those things will help you get those video files in there. So I'm going to double click. Then I am going to go to the folder that has the video. This is most likely your downloads folder if you just downloaded them. But I went ahead and created this source video file. So there's How the Eye. And if I want to import multiple files at the same time, I select one, I hold down Shift and select the other, or if and then click Import. And that takes a second. Okay, now both of these films, I believe, are the same resolution, the same frame rate, but we're going to find out if we drop one onto the timeline. To start with, let's look at the How the Eye Functions. So I'm going to go ahead and double click on that file. And then right in the source window, as a reminder, the file comes up. So I'm going to go ahead and right already the artwork in this is amazing, right? So I'm going to go ahead and find something with some animation in it. And so I'm just going to keep scrolling ahead. Oh, this looks good. All right, so I'm going to do all of these light particles or waves or whatever they are hitting the eye is going to be the section I'm interested in. So I'm going to use these, the circles on the end to zoom in on time a little bit, so it's a little bit easier for me to slide around and select the frames that I want. And so I'm going to go somewhere in there. I'm going to step back. There I'm right perfectly where I want to be, and I'm going to create an endpoint. So I hit the letter I on the keyboard, or I can click this bracket here. And then I'm going to go forward until the scene changes. Ooh, we'll keep going until this this whole thing is pretty amazing. So we're just going to go through all of this until there's rays across her face, and we'll just go ahead and step forward until we hit that final frame. There it is. And what I might do is actually, because this frame is in the middle of a dissolve, I might go ahead and bump it back one more. And then I'm going to hit the letter O on the keyboard to set that out point. And I'm just going to click and drag on the video in this preview and pull it down into the timeline. And that should create a sequence, and it should be the right resolution. So I've got this one clip of the eye, and now let's go ahead and double click on our other video source. This film is pretty amazing. The soundtrack's incredible. It's a really early video about computers, and they did this amazing computer generated music for the entire score, and it's just, yeah, if you like electronic music, this is where it all began. And they use this amazing light pen. I mean, it looks like a sci-fi film. Anyway, so from the 60s. But so let's go ahead and we're going to find a moment section. So I'm going to start here where there's just this little bit of blue text popping up. So I'm going to go ahead and put an endpoint there. And that is, you might be able to read the time code as well. So if you pause the video, you can say, oh, he did it at 6 minutes, 12 seconds, and 29 frames. And then we're going to go through whatever madness this is. And I'm just going to do this will be a really tiny clip. So we're just going to go to the last frame of that. And I'm going to step forward until I can find, and okay. So let's go back one. Right, so now if you sped this up, you could say, oh, it's 6 minutes, 36 seconds, and 5 frames. It happens to be that exact moment you want. Something to note, if you do know the exact moment in time that you want to be at, anywhere there's one of these blue highlighted time codes, if you select that, you can actually go in and edit it. So it doesn't just tell you where you are, but it allows you to set where you are. So if I set this back to, 6:30:05 and hit enter, right, it's going to hop the playhead back a few seconds in this clip. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and drag this clip down onto the timeline now, and I'm going to drop it directly behind and snap it to the clip ahead of it. And so the first thing we're going to look at is how to do a transition. And so right now we have and I'm going to, hold on, let me shut the volume on this down. Again, if you want to mute a track, all you do is come down here and click the M, and that will mute it. Right, oops. And we'll talk about what just happened there in a little bit, but let me zoom back out. Okay, so this is called a jump cut, right? When you have one clip and it immediately jumps to the next clip, right? Without any sort of fade between them or anything happening. And so, however, that's, and that's useful in some cases, but there's times when you want to have one scene fade, one shot fade into a next, or one scene fade into the next, right? There's different reasons to have a jump cut. If you're doing something that's like a narrative film and you do jump cuts, that tells the viewer that these two things are happening simultaneously. However, if you do a dissolve, which is when you fade from one clip into another, that signifies the passage of time. And those are standards that have been around a long time, so everyone's mind automatically associates those two things together. So let's go ahead and look at how to apply a transition. It's really pretty simple. All you do is and I'm going to zoom in again on the timeline for this, you click once on the very edge of the clip. It doesn't matter if it's the first clip or if you've actually clicked on the second clip. But what you do is you select that, and the simplest way is to apply the default transition. And the way you do that is you hover over what you've just selected and you right click, or use two keys on your keyboard, on your trackpad, and you come down, and the only option that's available right now is apply default transitions. And so you click apply default transitions, and you get what's called a cross dissolve. It's kind of hard to see right now, so I'm going to zoom out so I can grab this, and I'm going to put my playhead right on top of it and zoom in, just so you can see that it says cross dissolve. Notice that it's on the video and audio track, right? So the audio, if we had the mute off, the audio would be blending together as well. And by default, this transition is, I believe, 1 second long. Any sort of transition, you'll know you have a transition when you have this like tannish line over the video. And what a cross dissolve does is it basically is a linear dissolve, right? At a steady rate, the opacity of one layer dissipates over the course of this entire transition. So if I hit play and I'm on top of this transition, you can watch as it runs across into the other video, right? In this case, it's a pretty smooth, short transition. But something I want you to notice is, right, the end of the clip that I want for the eye is here. And the beginning of the clip that I want for this is here, but you'll see that there's footage that extends beyond that, right? Like her face shows up, even though that's not necessarily what I want. And so there are ways to make that change. And one of those ways is to select the cross dissolve, and you can actually drag it forward so that you could say, oh, well, I actually want this footage to end when the eye, right, this is the last thing I want people to be able to see. Or maybe I want it to go push a little bit beyond that, and so I want to just scoot this over a touch, right? And so when this plays, right, it's now, I don't see her face ever, but I get a little bit more of this eye at the end before it goes forward. And you'll notice I can, now that these are set, I can adjust these independently. The audio, you know, in this case, I don't care if those two soundtracks blend together the way they do, because we're not going to use it. So the other thing you can do with the cross dissolve on the timeline is if you select it and you hover over the end, and again, I'm going to zoom in so it's a little easier to see, you can actually stretch the dissolve out. And this is with any transition, you can make it longer. By default, I think it's a second long. You can make it longer. You can also make it significantly shorter. And so I've made it a bit longer now. If I zoom back out, we can watch the video. And you can see now that, right, this transition is taking a lot longer, and there's a longer period of time when both videos are on screen, right? So I can actually get a much smoother and longer transition there. And this really just depends on what you what your interest is, what your reason for doing this is. Sometimes it makes sense to have really short transitions. Like if you're doing a cross dissolve, sometimes you just need it, like if you don't have a dissolve and it's just a jump cut, it's really startling. But if you have just a couple frames, like 2 or 3 frames where it blends together, it smooths it out just enough that it's not quite so intense for the viewer, and it seems a little bit more natural. And so that's something to keep in mind. So then let's look at where else we can change our transition settings, and let's look at some other transition types. So if I select this transition again, and I come up here to my source window, right? The source tab is open right now, but there's effect controls right next to it. Let's go ahead and click on that. Under the effect controls, when you're on a transition, it shows you where the transition is, and it shows you the length. You can adjust the same two things we just adjusted, right? Where this transition occurs, and what's nice is you can actually see both clips that you're working on at the same time in this view. So I can adjust where that transition occurs, and I can also adjust the length of that transition. Right, so I can make this longer. I have a playhead up here as well, and it is a little bit twitchy. So you can see that if I drag the playhead up here, it is controlling the playhead down below as well. I have always found that it's a lot easier to use the playhead down on the timeline to scroll through things than it is to try and use it down here. And you'll notice that as I've done that, it automatically hopped into the clip that I had selected. So I'm going to click on my transition again down in the timeline. And you'll see that there are some settings here. I'm going to pull this closed a little bit. So you can also set the duration numerically. You can set the alignment, right? Either there's a custom start, or you can say center at cut, which is the default, start at cut or end at cut. And if you say show actual sources, it'll actually show the two little videos there. So let's go ahead and look at how we can apply different types of transitions. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to delete the transition that we've made. Because we're just going to use these two little clips for now. It'll make things a little bit easier. So let's go ahead and delete that transition and delete this transition. Now, something to know about transitions before we go any further is if you've created a transition and then you adjust the length of this clip, you move it you move this end away, it'll automatically delete the transition. And so you really only want to set transitions once you're absolutely sure this is where you want that transition to be. And you can make adjustments and then reapply the transition. It's just something to note. So where do we find other transitions? This is going to also lead into effects and how we can control effects that we apply to different clips. So in the same window pane that has the project, like our project files, there's other tabs, right? And what I want you to do is, you might have, effects might be showing up in your tabs right now. I'm going to try and hover over this and pull this out just a little bit further. There we go. All right, so there's effects. You can also click on this double arrow and choose effects. And when you do that, you get this list of options up here, different effects that you can apply. And so there's some presets, some lumetri presets, which are color correction presets. There's audio effects, audio transitions, video effects, and video transitions. We're going to look at the video transitions. So we're just going to open this up. And there's all sorts of options in here, right? There's the famous page peel. There's swipes, slides, zooms, iris, immersive video, which is more for VR video, like 360-degree video clips. We're not going to worry about those. But there's the dissolves. This cross dissolve is highlighted in blue because that's the default. There's dip to black, dip to white. These are great to add at the beginning or ending of a clip. And so if we go ahead and pull out, let's go ahead and go to the start of our timeline. And we're going to go ahead, and what I would like you to do is just go ahead and you select this, and then you click drag, and you can drop it on the front of this clip. And so now when this clip begins, it starts out black, and then it fades into the clip that we have. If we do dip to white, let's go ahead and do this at the end of our video. So we're going to go ahead and click here. We're going to drag over and let it just drop on top of that video clip. And so now, as this video transitions out, it's going to go to white before the scene ends. Right? There's a couple other options in there you can play with, but I just want to show you a couple more, right? If you use a page peel, you better have a really good reason for it. But this is an amazing, amazing transition that looks really professional. It blows my mind that they actually include this in in Premiere Pro because it's so cheeseball. But you know what? There's people that love the page peel. So so when I did that, I just drug it on here until it highlighted that it could be dropped, right? And so now I'm going to go ahead and play this. Ooh, I love the page peel. It's so amazing. Look at that. And you'll notice there's also this page turn. So if I delete my page peel and I replace it with this page turn, the difference is that the instead of having nothing on the page, when the page peels back, it's actually peeling the top video off. I don't know if you saw that. Let me zoom in on this a bit, and let's go ahead and make this a little bigger too. So I just want to show you, right, up above here, it looks a little bit different. You can say show actual sources, and right, the alignment, the duration, everything's up here. So we could just click on this blue text here and make the duration, I don't know, let's make it 4 seconds long, so it's like the slowest page peel of all time. Also, I'd like you to notice on the timeline now, we have this yellow line, but where our page turn is, there is a red line. That means that this isn't fully rendered yet, and we're just seeing a preview. And so it hasn't fully rendered preview files. And so sometimes what that means is that if you're doing a lot of effects and things on top of one another, it's trying to process those effects in real time. And so it'll bog down and it won't play back at full speed. So in this case, it's such an easy transition, right? Easy effect, it doesn't really matter. But yeah, so you can see, right, there's the video peeling back, right? It's just such a ridiculous effect. Some other classic things that you may have seen, right? The wipe is when the transition just so it wipes across the screen, right? There's also at the end of the first Star Wars movie, the round iris film, a round iris is used, and so if I drop that on here, right, so now it's this circle transition, which this actually fits really well with these two videos. So I think I'm going to leave that there, because it just seems appropriate to the source. So if you have a line like this red line, and you have a lot of and it's bogging down, and you're like, this isn't playing back at the speed it should be playing back. The way you fix that is you go up to sequence, and you go to render effects and work area. There's several options, and I was trying to figure out which one would be the best. But there's render effects and work area, render entire work area, render selection, and render audio. In this case, we just want to render the effects in the work area, and so I click on that, and it will very quickly render that little section, and now it's green, right? So technically these yellow areas haven't been rendered either, but when it's just playing back video, it doesn't really matter. And so now if there had been any delay in the playback of this section, that should be resolved. Okay, so those are transitions. So with the next section, we're going to be using the same clips, but we're going to be adding a couple more sections from that video, and we're going to start talking about different effects and layering effects on top of each other, and then using opacity and how to kind of start doing some keyframing.